Well, we're going to start with Psalm 54 because it is a psalm where the Ziphites come and said to Saul, "Is not David hiding among us?" And hopefully we're going to get to that part today. It kind of depends. So this is a psalm supposedly by David. "Save me, O God, by your name, and vindicate me by your power. Hear my prayer, O God. Give ear to the words of my mouth. For strangers have risen against me, and violent men have sought my life. They have not set God before them. Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the sustainer of my soul. He will recompense the evil to my foes, destroy them in your faithfulness. Willingly I will sacrifice to you. I will give thanks to your name, O Lord, for it is good. For he has delivered me from all trouble, and my eye has looked with satisfaction upon my enemies." Okay. Anyone have any comments about the song before we get started? Okay. It kind of reminded me a little bit of, have any of you ever read Mark Twain's War Prayer? It's a little short story. And they're in church and it's during Civil War. And the minister gets up and, does a sermon about, how God's on their side and he's going to smite their enemies and stuff. And so a man they don't know rises from the congregation, walks to the front and goes, "Now let's pray." And he prays the most bloodthirsty, "Smite the sons and daughters of our enemies, leave the widows weeping in the feet," and he goes, "Because God is on our side." Just showing that, and it always this, when we pray, "Smite my enemy,"
I've got a collection of his short stories, so I know I've read it at some point in 60 years. I'll have to go look that.
Yeah. It's one of my favorites, and it was really popular again, in the 60s and early 70s during the Hancock War days and all of that.
I remember reading that one. Mark Twain is probably my favorite author.
Mm-hmm.
In my house there are many rooms, many rooms. And I said, I hope when I die, I get into one with Mark Twain.
Yeah. Okay, Sarah,
yes.
Would you please read for us 1 Samuel 23, 1 through 14.
And they told David, saying, "Look, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah, and they are looting the threshing floors." And David inquired of the Lord, saying, "Shall I go and strike down these Philistines?" And the Lord said to David, "Go and strike down Philistines and rescue Keilah." And David's men said to him, "Look, we're afraid here in Judah, and how much more so if we go to Keilah against the Philistine lines?" And David again inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered him and said, "Rise, go down to Keilah, for I am about to give the Philistines into your hand." And David and his men went to Keilah and did battle with the Philistines, and he drove off their cattle and struck them a great blow. And David rescued the inhabitants of Keilah. And it happened when Abiathar, the son of Ahimelech, fled to David at Keilah, that the ephod came down in his hand. And it was told to Saul that David had come to Keilah. And Saul said, "God has given him in my hand, for he is closed inside a town with double gate and bolt." Saul summoned all the troops for battle to go down to Keilah to lay siege against David and his men. And David knew that Saul was scheming evil against him, and said to him, and David said, "Lord, God of Israel, your servant has indeed heard that Saul seeks to come to Keilah to destroy the town on my account. Will the notables of Keilah hand me over to him? Saul, come down as your servant has heard. Lord God of Israel, pray your servant." And the Lord said, "He will come down." And David said, Well, the notables of Keilah hand me over and my men to Saul. And the Lord said, they will hand you over. And David arose, and his men with him, about 600 men. And they came out from Keilah and moved about wherever they could. And to Saul it was told that David had gotten away from Keilah and had ceased going out. And David stayed in the wilderness and strongholds, and he stayed in the high country and the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul sought him out all the while, but God did not give him to his hand.
Okay. So, the very first at the beginning, behold, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah, and they're plundering the threshing floors, and he inquired of the Lord, shall I go do it? Okay, so one of the things that one of the scholars talked about is this whole idea of David turning to God, not taking it upon himself at this point in time. There are times when David does take it upon himself to do what David very well pleases. But at this point in time, he inquired of the Lord and said, is it in your will that I go to fight these people? And the other interesting thing is the people came to David. David was not king. Saul was king. But they came to David and said, the Philistines are fighting in Keilah. Can you go and save them? That should have been something they went to a king for. But Saul is having these problems, these mental issues, and everyone is aware that Saul's kind of single-minded at this point, which is to get rid of David. So then the Lord answered him, go attack the Philistines and save Keilah. By all outward appearances, this was kind of a crazy thing to do. But David's known for crazy things. I mean, after all, he slew Goliath, 5 smooth stones, slingshot, and went out and slew Goliath when everyone said it was impossible. David had 400 men. And remember back last week, they talked about the people that came to David. They owed debts.
They weren't that. They weren't top society.
That's right. One of the scholars said they had thin resumes and bad credit. So, and here they are. That's David's army. Men of thin resumes and bad credit. So, and
What happens when you look at the wrong resume?
That's when you need numbers. The volume counts.
And David's already having enough trouble hiding from Saul and fighting Saul. Kind of the last thing he needs to do is take on the Philistines. So it was kind of an ill-advised military campaign. He doesn't really have the army of people that are well-trained to go fight with him, nor does he have, and his energies have been split. And then David, according to some biblical scholars, say he did this for 2 reasons. The people needed to be saved, number 1. And 2, God said. So I think about reasons why I choose to do things. I'm not always sure I go because God said go. Sometimes I kind of filter it through. And do I have time? How much do I have on my plate? What's my week look like? Rather than, yes, God, I'm up and going. You're too busy for that.
That's right.
Does anybody else have excuses when they know have you ever had that sense that you should talk to a person, yet you walk away, you don't stop and have the conversation because you got.
Or call somebody in and see in a while.
Yeah. And we don't inquire of the Lord, is this from you? Do I need to be doing that?
And sometimes it's so strange because you'll say, I need to call so-and-so, and then the phone rings and they call you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a real sign
That
that,
happened this week, you know.
well, it's
I
interesting.
think there are those times where you can think, that somebody might need a little something, or you go, well, maybe Thursday I'll do that one. But there are those moments when something happens and you just know that you have to go and you do. You have to.
I have a friend that I was supposed to meet a week ago, and she sent me a message that said, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cancel a lot of family issues. And that was all that was said. And I just felt this overwhelming urge that I needed to call her, but I didn't. And about 10 minutes later, I said, Jeff, let me read you a text I got from this friend of mine. And I read it to him and I said, what do you think? And he goes, I think you're good enough friends that you can pick the phone up and call her. And I went, yeah, that's the voice for me.
This is someone you've known for 40 years.
Yeah.
It's not like
And-
you met last week.
Yeah.
And I picked up the phone and called her, and there was a lot going on. And she needed someone to talk to. And what if I'd gone on feeling like, well, is this something personal? She doesn't want me to intrude. And sometimes you have to go where angels fear to tread. You have to. Jeff was like, you're good enough friends. She can say, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
We're adults. So David realizes this is what God has commanded him to do. And anyway, the people need to be saved from the Philistines. And then, but then David's men said, we're here in Judah and we're afraid here. The Philistines are over there, but we're afraid here. How much more than if we go to Keilah against the Philistine forces? Like, we're here afraid of Saul, and like we're hiding out because we're afraid he's going to attack and kill us. And now you want us to go over here and fight the Philistines? Are you nuts? And
Is Keilah a city in Judah? Is that right?
It's a person.
no,
Yeah.
Keilah's a city.
It's a city.
It's a city.
Remember, I had no Old Testament training. Zero.
The nuns didn't do that, huh?
Yeah. And so, David,
They know about wrath though.
yeah, David knew that, this was not necessarily a democracy. David had been made captain over them, but he did listen to what they said. Okay, I hear what you're saying. So he inquired of the Lord again. Lord, let me just check over. Are you sure you want me to go? Let me remind you of all the reasons in case you forgot. I don't know about you, but I do pray like that. Lord, let me remind you of all that I have on my plate right now, because I've got a lot of people you're dealing with. So let me help you out. And God just, we make plans and God laughs, the old saying, and God says again, yes, go. He wondered, what is the thing to do? And the Lord said again, go down to Keilah, for I'm going to give the Philistines into your hand. This time, he not only tells him to go, he gives him a promise. All right, I told you the first time, go. Now you're back, go. It reminded me, as Jeff talked about, the Old Testament prophets. Always, Moses, you need to go and talk to the Pharaoh. I stutter. I don't speak well. I think you want to send someone else. Moses, I want you to go. I'll give you the words to say. I think my brother Aaron could go. He's kind of glib of tongue. We have lots of excuses, and sometimes we even run. We turn and run.
Just like Jonah.
Like Jonah. That's what
Yes,
it was.
exactly like Jonah. Jeff, tell them what you always say when you think you're supposed to do something God wants you to do.
I will do it. Don't want to be swallowed by a big old fish.
I know what the nuns would be saying. They said they'd be concerned about the insubordination of the men.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's how the nuns would have us into it.
Right.
Well, it all stems from a belief in separation. Believe that we're something separate from our Creator, when the truth being is that we are not. Without God, you're nothing. You don't exist. So if you accept that and start living in God consciousness, life becomes a whole lot different and easier. The yoke's not heavy. But we're stubborn.
Yes,
That's a nice one to say.
Spoken like an expert.
yes.
Say, that one hurt. I'll get the knife out. Because
Never turn your back.
She cuts deep, don't she?
note to self, don't say anything while Sarah's here.
Hangs around my wife.
So, David went to Keilah, fought and won. God delivered them into his hands, and he afflicted heavy losses and killed their cattle. So not only did he afflict heavy losses, he killed off their food source, he kind of made it like this was a total defeat. Not just a little bit, a total defeat. With an army that was, as we said before, thin reservation, athletic, and who was scared. So it had to have been the hand of God leading that allowed this to happen. Now, Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, had brought the ephod down with him when he fled to David at Keilah.
Wasn't Ahimelech the guy that got killed by Saul? Am I remembering that right? Was he the priest who was killed by
Yeah,
Saul?
but this is his son.
So because I thought he wiped out Ahimelech's whole family.
Everybody, he did. Abiathar was the son of Ahimelech, and Abiathar was the only one to survive.
Was the only one
Yes.
he didn't wipe out. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And he brought the ephod down, which there are lots of definitions, and you talked about it, I think, for you, about the ephod is the ceremonial robe that the high priest wears with the 12 stones for the 12 tribes. But it also can mean an idol, a graven image.
And that's what they're talking about here.
Yes.
And he's asking this graven image thingy to do something.
Yes, the Urim and the Thummim, the casting of the lots. The priest carried the lot dice, whatever it is, there to cast out. And so they're asking this ephod, the graven image, what are the choices? What should we do?
And the way I understood it was his questions were always could be answered with yes or no.
Yes or
so
no.
the answer was very clear.
Yes. No, I suppose so. None of this. It was a yes or no.
Either yes or no.
Yes.
And
That's what I
That's
was
what the
thinking.
magic game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although that staple will give you a vague answer every now and then.
Yeah, it would.
but when I talk to God, I don't get definite yes or no's. I'm jealous. I'd like to get yes or no.
Uh-huh.
I don't get that.
Well, sometimes when we get no, it makes us mad because that wasn't the answer we wanted. In fact, I was talking to a friend this week that had been praying for a miracle to happen, to heal someone, and they died. And she was angry. And I said, but they are healed now. It's the perfect heal. And she goes, that's not what I meant. I said, well,
You got to be precise.
yeah. I said, he healed her. She is healed. And
Well, I heard a story in one of the books that I read, the religious books that I've read or whatever, and someone said, I prayed and prayed for an open heart, and I got open heart surgery.
You got to be careful.
Yeah.
Wow. I used to go to, I had friends who would have prayer and praise potluck dinners, and they'd invite maybe 8 people. we'd have potluck and, talk about what God had done in our lives. And then we'd sit around the room and he'd give us a little 3x5 card and we were to write what we wanted people to pray on. And he'd collect them, shuffle them up, and everybody got a card. And for 1 minute, you prayed for whatever was on that card. And then he sent it around. And it was a very spiritual, those minutes got very, very short after the first couple. And he said, there are no rules about what you put down except for one. If you're praying for somebody to get pregnant, name the names. Because we got 3 babies out of the first one. The first time he did it, somebody said, I'm praying for a friend to get pregnant. And out of that group, 3 of them got pregnant. So you said be specific. It's not be specific. So it said.
That's right.
Yeah, and also pray in a manner in which it has already happened.
Right.
If you pray in a manner of wanting, like I want world peace, or I want this to happen, or I want this person to get over their sickness, that's what you will get.
Yeah,
You will always have a want. You will always have a wanting for world peace or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know where it's coming from.
See, I can't.
There's a lot of truth in
I
that.
can't pray for specifics because I'm not allowed to make any specifics.
Just have. It's also called faith. It's also called faith. Have strong enough faith to know that it's already happened, and don't have a what's the word I want? Don't have a preconceived outcome.
Of how it's gonna happen.
Right. Don't have a
Right, it's like David, he went to Goliath and
Yeah.
he knew what was gonna happen. He knew that he was gonna be successful.
Yeah, he had faith. Yeah, he had faith that it's not really in my hands. I'm just the tool. It's
You talked about your friend and death being like the ultimate healing. My dad had cancer and was died in a special facility in the hospital, insurance or whatever. For some reason he had to got down to the last day and he had to move to what he lovingly called the big house, which was a big, where my mother is now, the medical community. He didn't want to go to the big house. He died on Sunday, but had to go there on Monday. And I just couldn't. He chose.
We had 2 stories like that. The CWF Salad Group Thursday, and Kathy, you might have to help me remember because I don't remember one of them. Jim McCafferty's mother was in a facility, and she came within 4 days of running out of money and died. So they didn't have to put her in a really bad whole place. And Rose was just worried and worried and worried, and she said, "Didn't need to."
Within where my mom was, Spring Arbor. Well,
Okay.
that's all Rose over there. But I did that.
When my grandmother went in to have surgery, and it was much worse than they thought when they decided they were going to do the surgery. And when she woke up, the doctor said, you're much more frail than we had any idea, and you cannot go back and live independently. She had been living independently. And he goes, we're going to have to, either find somewhere for you to go, or you're going to have someone come and stay with you. And she goes, I think I'll die. She closed her eyes and did. Within an hour.
Wow.
Oh my heaven.
See, I would have just said, "Watch me," and moved back home.
Well, she was the last of 12 children, and all the other ones had gone.
Okay.
And she was ready.
She was ready.
Yeah.
And she was like, I think I'll die. And that was it. And, my mother was already like fretting about, okay, will she come with the bus? Will we get someone to go? Will we have, all the anxiety you immediately go into. And my grandmother had the solution. I'm just going to go ahead and go home. And that was how she saw it. I'm going to go. Enough already.
Yeah, all right.
Okay. Then Saul was told that David had gone to Keilah, and he goes, "Oh Lord, he's trapped in a city with gates and bars." And so Saul thought God had blessed him and had given David into his hands. And it's true that God led David to Keilah, that it did put him in Saul's hands if Saul went in to get him, but it isn't true that he delivered into his hand. He didn't. And Saul called up all his forces for battle. And this was not a war against the Philistines, the Edomites, any of those. It was against David. And Saul made the mistake of thinking that anyone who was an enemy of his was an enemy of the Lord's, instead of realizing perhaps Saul was on the bad side of the Lord.
Even though Samuel had already told him.
Yes. Even though Samuel had already told him. Saul was motivated by self-interest. Let me get rid of David. My kingdom will be safe. I don't have any more usurpers. Maybe my family's loyalty will come back to me. Already his daughter has helped David escape, and Jonathan has pledged a covenant with David. So members of Saul's family have turned against him. So when David learned that Saul was plotting against him, he said to Abiathar, "Bring the ephod. And Lord God of Israel, your servant has heard definitely that Saul plans to come to Keilah and destroy the town on account of me. Will the citizens of Keilah turn me over? And tell me." So here we go again. This is the third time now during this one chapter. David has inquired of the Lord. I heard Saul's coming to Keilah to get me. Are the people of this town going to turn me over?
I just liked it. The Lord said, "Yep, he will."
Yeah, and that's exactly what he says. Yes, I will. Okay. Again, David asked, "Will the citizens of Keilah surrender me and my men to Saul?" And God says, yes, they're going to surrender him.
Yeah, what part of that did you not understand?
I know.
Yeah.
Again, he inquires. He says, "Bring the ephod." He inquires. They do the ephod, and the answer is yes, they're going to come. So he goes,
Let's get out.
"Now are the people of Keilah going to turn me over?" Yes. Reuben and Thurman came up again. Yes. So David and his men left and kept moving from place to place. When Saul was told that David had escaped, he didn't bother to go. So in all effect, David could have stood and fought there, and knowing David, he probably wanted to. He probably wanted to, be big bad David and defeat Saul and do what he could. But he knew that a lot of innocent people would get hurt. And so Saul halted the expedition once David left. And once again, he saved the city of Keilah. Not just from the Philistines, but from Saul. So David stayed in the wilderness and strongholds and the hills of the desert of Ziph. He did Psalm 54. Day after day, Saul searched for him, but God did not give David into his hands. Okay, the wilderness of Ziph. I did some research on this. It's a town below the southern tip of the Dead Sea. And it's dramatically varied landscape. It's not a comfortable or easy place to be. And one of the scholars said, David became a man after God's heart in the shepherd's field. He became a king in the wilderness of Ziph because he had to endure, make decisions, crafty, Saul sought him every day. So he had to keep running. They were constantly on the move. Constantly on the move. In fact, Saul was so obsessed with killing David, he neglected everything else that the Lord wanted him to do. I mean, that became, he was single focused. I'm killing David. The rest of the kingdom can go to hell for all I care. Let me get David out of the way, and then I'll go pick the pieces up. And so, while David was at Horesh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. Don't be afraid, he said. This is verse 15. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. And the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. Jonathan went home, but David remained at Horesh. Okay. Well, what an example of the friendship between David and Jonathan. Like, I'm here to make a covenant. I know you're God's anointed. I know my father is the king right now, but I will make a covenant with you that when you become king, I will be your answer. Of course, that doesn't come to pass because Jonathan is killed, but they have made this covenant. Okay, can someone read verses 16 through 23?
I can do that. Saul's son Jonathan set out and came to David at Horesh. There he strengthened his hand for the Lord. He said to him, do not be afraid, for the hand of my father Saul shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be second to you. My father Saul also knows that this is said. Then the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. David remained at Horesh, and Jonathan went home. Then some Ziphites went up to Saul at Gibeah and said, David is hiding among us in the strongholds of Horesh on the hill of Hakilah, which is south of Jeshimon. Now, O king, whenever you wish to come down, do so, and our part will be to surrender him into the king's hand. Saul said, may you be blessed by the Lord for showing me compassion. Go and make sure once more. Find out exactly where he is and who has seen him there, for I am told that he is very cunning. Look around and learn all the hiding places where he lurks, and come back to me with sure information. Then I will go with you, and if he is in the land, I will search him out among all the thousands of Judah. So they set out and went to Ziph ahead of Saul.
The thing that I liked the best about this passage is it says, and Jonathan strengthened David's hand in the Lord. In other words, he was there with him seeking God. He made him strong in God. And I love that. I think of people in my life who reared me, who helped me seek the Lord, to establish my early relationship with him and how to have my walk with him. And it says, do not fear. He said, Saul, my father, isn't going to find you. The Lord's already promised that you're going to be king. The Lord's not going to renege on that promise. And I shall be next to you. The two of them made a covenant before the Lord. And they'd already made a covenant in 1 Samuel 18:3, but they confirmed that covenant again. And it doesn't make the covenant less precious. It just reminds them we've got this covenant. Okay.
Jonathan's rather extraordinary when you think about it, because he would have been in line to become king himself. So he, if he were self-serving, he would have been on his dad's side, and instead, it's a real testament, I think, to his faith that he that he was following God and aligning himself with David.
Then, just as he said, our part will be the Ziphites come to Saul and say, we'll tell you where David is. And Saul says, you're blessed of the Lord. Once again, Saul presuming he knows God's mind. And it says, go and get me more information. Tell me where David is. They tell me he's very crafty. And I will track him down in all the tribes of Judah. Okay. And then Psalm 54, David expressed his feeling to the Lord in song. So they set out and went to Ziph ahead of Saul. Now David and his men were in the desert of Moab, in the Arabah south of Jeshimon. So can somebody read verses 24 till the end of the chapter? Okay.
When Saul returned from following the Philistines, he was told David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi. Then Saul took 3,000 chosen men out of all Israel, went to look for David and his men in the direction of the rocks of the wild goats. He came to the sheepfolds beside the road where there was a cave, and Saul went
Is that
in.
24 or 23? What is that? 22.
Right here, one-
No, verse 24.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh. So they set out and went to Ziph ahead of Saul. David and his men were in the wilderness of Mason, in the Arabah south of Jeshimon. Saul and his men went to search for him. When David was told, he went down to the rock and stayed in the wilderness of Maon. When Saul heard of that, he pursued David into the wilderness of Maon. Saul went on one side of the mountain, David and his men on the other side of the mountain. David was hurrying to get away from Saul, while Saul and his men were closing in on David and his men to capture him. Then a messenger came to Saul saying, hurry and come, for the Philistines have made a raid on the land. So Saul stopped pursuing David and went against the Philistines. Therefore, that place was called the Rock of Escape. David then went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En-Gedi.
Okay. Look at how close. Saul's on one side of the mountain, David's on the other side of it. Right there. I mean,
And I prepared for this last week too, and didn't get there. And one of the commentators I read said it was like a pincer movement. It's always actually coming around him, and David very, very narrowly escaped.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very narrowly escaped. We're leaving too, because we're just going to finish the chapter. It says, as Saul and his forces were closing in on David, a messenger came to Saul and said, come quickly, the Philistines are attacking. And Saul had to leave. One more intervention. And then he said, so they called that place Selah Amiligal. Yes, I can pronounce it. And that is called the Rock of Divisions, or the Rock of Separateness, or the Rock of Escape.
Mine has it as, it's called Separation Hill.
Okay, I like it.
I've got dividing rock.
Okay. I think that's a place in West Virginia.
Yeah.
Devil's Backbone.
Yeah.
Okay, and then he stayed in En-Gedi, which was a place in the Bible known for beauty and refuge amid the surrounding wilderness, an oasis in the land of Israel. En-Gedi served to protect David as he fled from Saul, and was referenced in a beautiful poem about love. Song of Solomon. In the future, En-Gedi will witness the miracle of the renewal of the Dead Sea. God's provision is amply displayed in the beauty and natural resources of En-Gedi. So David was able to go to a place where he could stay for a while. They could rest, relax. There were plenty of supplies there. Okay. So,
Just quickly, when I think about, we read about these stories, these environments, I know that what we see now is a vast desert, Egypt. was at one time a very rough wooded area. And so when we're reading these stories, sometimes I'm hearing them through today's vision of that environment. And I'm not sure that what I'm
Well,
conditions.
One of the big thing that came up early on when David was saying, and I talked with Harold about this, is when David was saying that he was protecting the sheep, his herd, from lions and tigers and bears. And we said there weren't any lions and tigers there. There were.
Yeah.
There was a bear that was living in that area during that time, and a Adriatic lion that existed in that area at that time. So, you know, we think that,
Yeah.
you know, it didn't happen that way, but it was a completely different kind of environment that are now extinct.
Yes, things change over 3,000.
And prior to that, I thought when
What?
you mentioned lions and things like that, those were often symbols for different nations.
Yeah.
So you're thinking of it symbolically rather than a real lion.
Yeah.